Racist neighbor shoots black man, thinking he'd get away with it. Isaac and Maya had dreamed of moving into their new home, a modest yet cozy house in a friendly neighborhood. They imagined barbecues, neighborhood gatherings, and a place to call their own, a slice of the American dream. But their first day brought a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. As they unloaded boxes from the moving van, Isaac noticed a figure watching from the upstairs window of the house next door. He squinted, catching the glare of an older man, his face creased with disapproval. Isaac attempted a friendly wave, but the man turned and disappeared from the window without a gesture in return. Later that evening, as they unpacked, a loud knock shook their front door. Opening it, they found their neighbor, Mr. Finch, standing with arms crossed, his lips pursed. "Just so you know, I like my peace," he said curtly. Isaac and Maya, caught off guard, tried to reassure him, but Mr. Finch cut them off with a scowl and walked away. As the weeks passed, Isaac and Maya noticed more troubling signs: harsh notes left in their mailbox, accusations of disturbing the peace when they played music softly in the afternoon. A sense of unease crept into their lives. This wasn't the welcoming neighborhood they had envisioned. It felt more like a silent battlefield, and they had no idea just how dangerous their new neighbor could become. The notes didn't stop. Each morning, Isaac and Maya found fresh complaints stuffed into their mailbox, accusing them of infractions they hadn't committed. "Keep it down," read one, though the house had been silent the night before. "Pick up after yourselves," demanded another, even though the lawn was spotless. It was as though Mr. Finch was inventing reasons to harass them. Then came the small but sinister acts. Isaac's car tires were mysteriously deflated one morning. The trash bins they left on the curb would be overturned, contents spilled across the driveway. Maya found the plants in her front garden trampled, as if someone had deliberately stomped on them during the night. When they confronted Mr. Finch, he denied everything, looking them squarely in the eye with an unsettling calm. "Maybe you two just aren't cut out for the neighborhood," he muttered before slamming his door. Isaac and Maya were torn. They wanted to report Mr. Finch's harassment, but they feared retaliation, and besides, what evidence did they have? They could hardly prove that he was responsible for these petty acts, despite their suspicions. The police wouldn't take them seriously for overturned trash cans or crushed plants. As the weeks dragged on, tension grew within their own home. Isaac and Maya began to feel like prisoners in the very place they had hoped would bring them freedom and happiness. Every small sound in the night set their nerves on edge. Every glimpse of Mr. Finch filled them with anger and fear. They didn't know it yet, but this tension was only the beginning. Mr. Finch was escalating, and their nightmare was far from over. It was a clear autumn morning when Isaac decided to trim the branches of the old oak tree in their front yard. He found solace in yard work, hoping it would distract him from the constant tension radiating from next door. Maya stood on the porch, keeping him company as he maneuvered a small ladder and reached for the higher branches. Just as he was about to cut a particularly stubborn branch, a loud crack echoed through the air. For a split second, Isaac thought he had snapped the branch with a little too much force. But then a searing, white-hot pain ripped through his neck, radiating down his spine. He collapsed, the clippers clattering to the ground as Maya's scream pierced the morning. Isaac's vision blurred, and he could barely process what had happened. He felt his hand instinctively reaching for his neck, where something warm and sticky pulsed under his fingers. The world around him faded as he struggled to breathe, the pain overwhelming him. Maya was by his side in seconds, her frantic voice cutting through his haze. "Isaac, Isaac, stay with me." She was dialing 911, her hands shaking as she pressed down on his wound, desperate to stop the bleeding. As sirens wailed in the distance, Isaac slipped in and out of consciousness, the only thought in his mind a confused jumble of shock and fear. He knew who had done this. Even without seeing, he felt certain. Mr. Finch had finally crossed the line from harassment to violence. The police and paramedics arrived, whisking Isaac away to the hospital. Maya watched, numb and horrified, as they took her husband, wondering if their neighbor's relentless hatred would rob her of the man she loved. The days after Isaac's injury were filled with endless questions. The police, doctors, family members, and even curious neighbors came and went, each with their own theories about the violent attack. But as he sat in his hospital bed, Isaac was certain of one thing. Mr. Finch's hatred had pushed him to do the unthinkable. Maya sat by his side, her face etched with worry and exhaustion. She had spent days trying to piece together any clues, and the sheer weight of their shared fear was evident in her expression. She handed him her phone, showing him a list of documented incidents they had endured since moving in. 19 reports of harassment, calls to the police, complaints, photos of vandalized property, each one a reminder of Mr. Finch's escalating rage. Isaac's blood ran cold as he scrolled through the evidence, the bitterness of their neighbor's aggression bleeding through every word and image. "It's like he's been building up to this," he muttered, feeling a deep sense of betrayal at the quiet neighborhood that had once seemed so inviting. Maya nodded, her voice a whisper. "I should have pushed harder to leave sooner. I thought it would blow over." A police officer arrived later that day, formally informing them that Mr. Finch was now under investigation. Isaac could see the officer's hesitation as he recounted the process, warning them that proving attempted murder would be complicated without direct evidence. The system, it seemed, wasn't built to handle a case like theirs, one that lay somewhere between long-standing resentment and open violence. As the officer left, Isaac felt a profound shift within him. This wasn't just a crime of anger or resentment, it was hatred, a simmering darkness that had nearly taken his life. And now he understood that if they didn't pursue justice, it could happen again. Back home, Isaac and Maya felt like strangers in their own space. The familiar rooms in the yard where Isaac had once felt at peace now served as constant reminders of the trauma inflicted by their neighbor. But instead of retreating into fear, they decided to act. With the assistance of their lawyer, Carla, they began compiling evidence. Carla was direct but compassionate, understanding the gravity of what they had endured. She encouraged them to document every incident, every note, every deflated tire, every ominous glance. "If we're going to make a case for attempted murder," she explained, "we need to show a history of hostility and intent." Isaac and Maya sifted through everything they had collected over the past 11 months. The stack of notes from Mr. Finch painted a disturbing picture of a man unhinged. From minor annoyances to thinly veiled threats, each note told the story of a neighbor whose hatred simmered just beneath the surface. After gathering the evidence, Carla filed for a restraining order on their behalf. While the process felt overwhelming, it also brought a small measure of comfort. Knowing that they were taking steps to protect themselves helped restore a sense of control, however fragile. The police were cooperative, though cautious. The officers were bound by protocol, reminding Isaac and Maya that the restraining order wouldn't stop Mr. Finch if he truly meant them harm. It was a warning they understood all too well, but they had little choice but to place their faith in the legal system. As they prepared for what was sure to be a long and grueling process, Isaac and Maya clung to each other, finding strength in their unity. They knew that this battle wasn't just about their own safety. It was about reclaiming their home, their peace, and their right to live without fear. Isaac had just stepped outside to get the mail when he saw Mr. Finch standing on his porch, watching him with a smirk that sent a chill down his spine. Mr. Finch's presence was no accident. Isaac knew he was out there to intimidate, to remind him that a piece of paper wouldn't stop him. The restraining order, freshly issued, felt almost laughable under that cold gaze. As Isaac turned to go back inside, Mr. Finch called out, his voice dripping with contempt. "You really think that little court order means anything?" he sneered. "You're in my neighborhood. Don't think for a second that I'll be run out by the likes of you." The words hit Isaac like a punch. He had kept his silence, endured the harassment, and even survived being shot, but the outright provocation was too much. Anger surged in him, pushing away the fear that had held him back for so long. He walked closer, staring Mr. Finch in the eye. "Stay away from us," Isaac warned, his voice steady but firm. "This isn't a game. If you come near me or my family again, I will make sure you pay for it." Mr. Finch's smirk faltered for a moment, but it quickly returned, his eyes flashing with a twisted kind of satisfaction. "We'll see about that," he muttered, before retreating into his house, leaving Isaac standing alone, his fists clenched and heart racing. Maya came outside, worry etched into her face. She'd heard every word and knew what this confrontation meant. It was an escalation, one that would push Mr. Finch further. "Maybe we should just move, Isaac?" she whispered. "Is it really worth the risk?" Isaac looked at her, the weight of everything they'd endured hanging heavily in the air. "We can't keep running. This is our home, Maya. I won't let him take that from us." Together, they went back inside, but they knew this was only the beginning. The confrontation had lit a fuse, and now they had no choice but to see it through. The day Mr. Finch was officially charged with attempted murder felt surreal. Isaac and Maya sat in the courtroom, their nerves stretched thin as the charges were read aloud. Hearing the words in that sterile, detached voice made everything feel both more real and more unreal. A strange paradox that left Isaac cold. The prosecutor laid out the details, the harassment, the buildup of incidents, and finally, the shot fired from Mr. Finch's upstairs window, which had nearly taken Isaac's life. Each fact felt like a small victory, a piece of validation for everything they had suffered. Mr. Finch sat in the defendant's chair, his expression unreadable, but Isaac could feel the weight of his simmering resentment. Outside the courthouse, things took an unexpected turn. As they left, Isaac and Maya were confronted by a small group of Mr. Finch's family and friends who had come to show their support. One of them, a middle-aged woman with a hard expression, stepped forward, her words sharp and accusatory. "You're ruining an innocent man's life," she spat. "You two moved in here and started trouble. This is his home, and you're the ones who don't belong." Maya held Isaac's arm, trying to guide him away, but Isaac couldn't ignore the sting of the words. "He tried to kill me," he replied, his voice steady but filled with exhaustion. "We did nothing but exist, and that was enough for him to hate us." The woman scoffed, but other people had started to watch, their murmurs growing louder. Isaac and Maya quickly left, their hearts pounding, realizing that this battle was more complicated than they'd imagined. They weren't just up against Mr. Finch. They were facing a community divided, some of whom saw Mr. Finch as the victim and the couple as intruders. Back at home, the relief of the charge being filed was tempered by an uncomfortable truth. The road to justice would be long, and it would test their resilience at every turn. But as they closed the door, shutting out the hostility from outside, they felt a glimmer of hope. They had taken the first step, and there was no turning back. Isaac and Maya began to notice the subtle, and sometimes not so subtle ways their neighborhood had changed. Friends who once greeted them warmly now offered only terse nods, if they acknowledged them at all. On the other hand, some neighbors voiced their support quietly, stopping by with a wave or a sympathetic smile when they thought no one else was watching. One evening, Mrs. Lopez, who lived across the street, came over with a small casserole dish. "I know things must be hard for you," she whispered, looking over her shoulder nervously. "But I just wanted you to know not everyone here feels the same way. As them." She handed Maya the dish and gave Isaac's shoulder a comforting squeeze before hurrying back across the street. But for every Mrs. Lopez, there seemed to be another neighbor unwilling to see things from Isaac and Maya's side. A week after Mr. Finch's charge, they woke up to find their garage door defaced with graffiti. The hateful words sent a chill through Maya. She had spent the entire morning scrubbing them off, her hands red and raw by the time the last traces were gone. Isaac's frustration grew with each incident, each lingering glare or muttered comment. He had never imagined a community like this could fracture so easily, that neighbors who barely knew them would take sides with Mr. Finch, a man whose hatred had nearly cost him his life. It wasn't long before a neighborhood meeting was called. Though it was framed as a community discussion, it was clear that the real purpose was to discuss Isaac and Maya's case. Miss Finch's supporters accused the couple of bringing trouble into their peaceful neighborhood, some even suggesting that they should leave to restore the harmony. When Isaac finally spoke, his voice was strong but filled with emotion. "We moved here for the same reasons as all of you. A safe, peaceful home. What happened to me, what my wife and I have endured, isn't just our problem, it's a problem for everyone here." The room was silent, the weight of his words settling over the crowd. Some people shifted uncomfortably, while others looked at him with newfound understanding. As they left the meeting, Maya squeezed Isaac's hand, and he could feel the steady pulse of her resolve. The divide in the neighborhood was undeniable, but Isaac and Maya knew they weren't alone. And as they walked home under the quiet evening sky, they felt, for the first time in months, a small but fierce hope. The day of the trial dawned with a heavy sense of anticipation. Isaac and Maya sat in the courtroom, nerves frayed as they waited for the proceedings to begin. The room was filled with spectators, a mix of curious onlookers, neighbors, and reporters, each hoping to witness the drama that had gripped the community. The prosecutor began by laying out the evidence. The months of harassment, the physical damage Isaac had suffered, and the undeniable trajectory of the bullet fired from Mr. Finch's upstairs window. Each piece of evidence felt like a small vindication, validating what Isaac and Maya had endured. When Isaac took the stand, he felt every eye on him, each gaze pressing down like a weight. He recounted the harassment, the shooting, and the fear that had taken over his life. His voice trembled at times, but he pushed through, determined to make sure his truth was heard. He described the day of the shooting in vivid detail, how a seemingly ordinary morning had transformed into a nightmare. As he spoke, he could see some of the jurors exchanging glances, expressions shifting with empathy and horror. Then it was Mr. Finch's turn. His defense lawyer painted him as an upstanding member of the community, a victim of a misunderstanding. Finch himself claimed he hadn't meant to hurt anyone, and that he didn't even know Isaac was in his yard. He avoided eye contact with Isaac, but his gaze occasionally flickered with something dark and unrepentant. The testimonies continued, including Maya's account of the impact this ordeal had on their lives. She spoke of her constant fear, her sleepless nights, and the helplessness that had engulfed them both. Her voice cracked as she explained the moments of peace she longed for, the life she had once envisioned slipping further away with each day they spent under Mr. Finch's shadow. By the time the judge called for a recess, emotions were running high. As they stepped outside the courtroom, Isaac and Maya felt the gravity of what was at stake. They knew they had given it everything, laying bare their pain and resilience in front of a room full of strangers. Now, all they could do was wait and hope that justice would finally be served. After a grueling day in court, Isaac felt an urge to return to the place where everything had changed. The tree in his yard. It had stood there, tall and unbothered, a silent witness to the violence inflicted on him. Though revisiting the spot made his stomach twist with anxiety, Isaac felt a strange compulsion to confront it. Maya offered to come with him, but he assured her he wanted to do this alone. She nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment, and watched from the window as he slowly walked across the yard, each step weighted with the memories of that day. Standing beneath the tree, he closed his eyes, replaying the events. He could almost feel the sharp, sudden pain as the bullet tore through him, the panic that had gripped him as he fell. The memory made his throat tighten, but he fought it back, breathing deeply, grounding himself in the present. The tree's branches rustled softly above him, their sound oddly soothing. Isaac ran his fingers along the bark, where his blood had once stained it. To his surprise, the anger that had fueled him for months began to loosen its hold. He felt sadness, yes, and a bitterness that he couldn't fully shake, but something else rose within him, a resilience that had been buried under layers of fear. This place, once tainted by violence, began to feel different. It wasn't just a memory of trauma, it was a testament to his survival. He was still here, still standing, still fighting for his right to live in peace. Mr. Finch had tried to take that from him, but Isaac realized he could reclaim it. As he stood there, he made a silent promise to himself and to Maya. No matter the trial's outcome, he would not let hatred dictate their lives. This was their home, and it would remain so, with or without the shadow of what had happened. Returning inside, Isaac felt lighter, as though a weight had lifted. Maya looked at him, and he gave her a small, genuine smile. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next. Maya had been Isaac's rock throughout the ordeal, but she knew she couldn't simply remain in the background. It was time for her to take a stand, not just as Isaac's wife, but as an advocate for their family and for justice. She felt the weight of what they had endured and knew that they were far from alone. Other neighbors had quietly suffered intimidation from Mr. Finch too. Determined, Maya organized a small meeting at their home, inviting a handful of supportive neighbors, including Mrs. Affle, Lopez, and others who had expressed sympathy. Sitting in their cozy living room, she addressed the group, her voice unwavering. "What happened to Isaac shouldn't happen to anyone. We all deserve to feel safe in our homes," she said, looking at each person in turn. "But Mr. Finch has been allowed to terrorize this community, and it's time we stand together." The neighbors exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement. Mrs. Lopez spoke up first, her voice quivering with emotion. "I've seen the way he watches people. He's not just Isaac's problem, he's everyone's problem. I'm tired of living in fear." Encouraged by the support, Maya proposed a plan. They would file a collective petition for further action against Mr. Finch, presenting their shared concerns to the police and local authorities. The more voices, the harder it would be for the court to ignore the pattern of intimidation. In the days that followed, Maya dedicated herself to collecting signatures and statements. Each conversation strengthened her resolve. Some neighbors still hesitated, fearful of retaliation, but others were willing to step forward, sharing stories of unnerving encounters with Mr. Finch. Together, they painted a picture of a man whose behavior had cast a shadow over the entire neighborhood. Through her efforts, Maya found strength she hadn't realized she possessed. She knew the path forward wouldn't be easy, but with every signature and every voice that joined their cause, she felt their community growing stronger. Isaac and Maya were no longer alone in their fight. They had built a circle of allies, ready to stand with them. As Maya submitted the petition to the police, she felt a renewed sense of hope. This was more than just a battle for justice. It was a fight for their right to live in peace. And with the community by their side, she knew they had a chance. The courthouse was tense with silence as Isaac, Maya, and their supporters filed into the courtroom for the final day of the trial. Weeks of testimonies, cross-examinations, and evidence had led them to this moment. Isaac sat beside Maya, their hands tightly clasped, each heartbeat echoing the uncertainty that filled the room. The judge entered, and everyone rose, the gravity of the moment hanging thick in the air. Isaac's mind drifted to all they had endured. The sleepless nights, the hostility from parts of the community, the near-fatal attack, and he braced himself for the outcome, whatever it might be. Maya squeezed his hand, grounding him. As the jury foreperson rose, they announced the verdict: guilty of attempted murder. Relief flooded through Isaac, a release of tension he hadn't realized he was holding. The words seemed to echo, each syllable a reassurance that their suffering had been recognized, that the system had seen the truth of what had happened. The courtroom was split in its reactions. Mr. Finch's family and supporters muttered angrily, some glaring at Isaac and Maya. But on the other side, their small circle of allies exhaled in unison, eyes shining with relief and support. The judge addressed Mr. Finch, stating that his actions went beyond neighborhood disputes and demonstrated a clear intent to cause harm. As he handed down the sentence, a substantial prison term, Isaac felt a weight lift. Justice had been served, not only for him but for everyone Mr. Finch had terrorized over the years. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around, eager for statements. Maya spoke on their behalf, her voice calm but firm. "This isn't just about us. No one should have to live in fear of violence in their own home. We hope that this case reminds people of the importance of standing up against hate." As they left, Isaac felt a profound sense of closure. While the scars, both physical and emotional, would take time to heal, he and Maya could finally begin to reclaim their lives. They had fought a battle they never asked for, and they had won, with each other and their community standing by their side. In the weeks that followed the trial, Isaac and Maya found themselves at a crossroads. The victory had brought them justice, but the memories of everything they had endured lingered in every corner of their home. Friends and family suggested they move somewhere new, a place untouched by the darkness they had experienced here. For a time, they considered it, drawn to the idea of a fresh start. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Maya voiced the question that had been on both their minds. "Do you think we could ever feel at peace here again?" She asked, her gaze drifting to the window overlooking the yard. Isaac thought about it, his eyes following hers to the tree outside. The scars from the ordeal were real, but so was their resilience. "This is our home," he said softly, conviction strengthening his voice. "We fought for this place, and I don't want to let him take that away from us. Not now, not ever." Maya nodded, understanding. She, too, felt the attachment to their home, the life they had built here despite the hardship. The community had shown them support. Neighbors who once seemed distant now greeted them warmly, recognizing them as more than newcomers. They were a part of the neighborhood, an integral piece of its heart. Over the next few days, they focused on reclaiming their space. Maya painted the garage door, covering the remnants of the hateful graffiti with bright, bold colors that symbolized hope. Isaac tended to the yard, trimming the branches of the oak tree that had once been a source of trauma, but now felt like a symbol of their endurance. With each small change, their home transformed, shedding the darkness of the past and filling with the promise of new memories. They hosted a small gathering, inviting the neighbors who had supported them, building a sense of community they had once longed for. Standing in the yard together, surrounded by laughter and familiar faces, Isaac and Maya felt a renewed sense of peace. This was more than just a house. It was a testament to their courage, their resilience, and their love. Months passed, and life gradually returned to a peaceful rhythm for Isaac and Maya. They had reclaimed their home, transforming it into a space filled with warmth, love, and resilience. Every day felt like a small victory, each one bringing them further from the trauma and closer to healing. Isaac still carried scars, physical and emotional, but with each passing day, they became less a reminder of pain and more a testament to his survival. He had started counseling, learning ways to manage the trauma that sometimes resurfaced in moments of quiet. Maya joined him, supporting him, and finding healing for herself as well. Together, they were learning to let go of the shadows that had loomed over their lives. The neighborhood, too, had shifted. Many neighbors now saw Isaac and Maya in a new light, greeting them with warmth and kindness. Mrs. Lopez often stopped by, bringing treats and chatting on their porch, a newfound friendship that brought Maya comfort. Isaac joined a local volunteer group, contributing his time to community projects, a way of giving back to the neighborhood that had ultimately supported him. One autumn afternoon, they decided to plant a new tree beside the old oak. They chose a small cherry blossom, its delicate branches swaying gently in the cool breeze. As they dug together, laughter and light-hearted conversation filled the yard, a contrast to the fear that had once hung so heavily there. Planting the tree felt symbolic, a fresh start woven into the very fabric of their home. They knew it would take time for it to grow, but that patience mirrored their own journey of healing. As they stepped back to admire their work, Isaac wrapped an arm around Maya, pulling her close. "We did it," he said softly, his voice filled with gratitude. They had endured more than they could have imagined, but they had emerged stronger, united in a way that nothing, not even hatred or violence, could ever break. They turned and walked hand in hand back toward their home, their steps steady, their hearts lighter. It wasn't just survival, it was triumph. And as they looked forward to the future, they knew they had finally found peace. Thank you all for joining us on this journey through Isaac and Maya's story. A powerful tale of resilience, justice, and the strength it takes to reclaim peace after unimaginable adversity. Their courage reminds us that, even in the face of hatred, love and determination can triumph. If this story moved you or offered a new perspective, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life. Feel free to share this video with others who might need a reminder of the power of community and resilience. And of course, subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage, hope, and the human spirit. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more.